Hey you, did you check your calendar? That's right, today's the unspecified day in February in which I'm uploading this video all about Flash. Oh, nope, not that one. Nope, definitely not that one. Oh wait, nope, that is Crime. And, oh wait, yeah, no.
Incinerate! Did I scare you? Game's up. Fun's over. How inconsiderate of you.
Motion to compel! Breath of the flame!
Demo 5, Flash. He was having to but just like the videos on Surf and Fly, I'm really only going to be concerned with how the move works outside of that. Just a heads up, this one is really tricky, so buckle up. To figure out what we need to be successful here, let's focus on the way Flash works in the games in which we still need. This includes Generations 1,
Quietly now.
in Gen 1 and 2, Flash
Busted.
otherwise
Here comes the catch.
especially with Gold,
Late.
Silver,
You're
and
up.
Crystal.
There is no escape. Now you shall perish.
Out the use of Flash. After using it, the area is completely limited. For that reason, with Pokemon a fighting game, we're going to focus on the way Flash works in Gen 3 specifically.
Don't be scared.
These days, Flash is your area of vision is slight, which to me is basically how it would function if you had a decent land. Basically, it feels more realistic and also way more viable. In the past, I've always factored in whether a Pokemon could already learn the move in-game or not into my decision-making process, but for Flash, the move stopped being in Gen as early as Gen 4 and then was excluded from the games entirely after Gen 7.
The case before
So it
us
wouldn't really be
is
fair
a
to all of the
strange
potential
and
learners after Gen 7,
unprecedented one
which is
indeed.
a ton of Pokemon. Plus, I'm not really sure it matters. Like, Magcargo, as you'll see later, is one of the only Pokemon that I think, like, definitively should learn Flash, and yet it can't in the games. Meanwhile, Happy, good to go, baby. Considering Pokemon can surf and fly, it's an easy question. Can the Pokemon float in water or fly through the air while carrying tags?
Motion to
For
compel.
Flash, the question is a little bit more nuanced. There feel like a lot of different ways this could work. Like, for example, you might argue that any Pokemon that can use Flamethrower or Thunderbolt should be considered, because those moves are clearly pretty bright. Okay, sure, but can a Pokemon sustain either of those moves for hours while you traverse a cave? Probably not. The first big question we have to ask is how the Pokemon works like literally what mechanism do they use? There are a couple of Pokemon who have effects exclusively safe. Like, those guys I'm cool to use colorful since they know to learn Flash. For instance, Solgaleo. It's his whole thing. Please let him have this. He's in danger of being forgotten. Please, when it comes to life generation, most of the Pokemon that can already learn Flash in the games are electric. I think the justification is that electricity equals life, right? Well, kind of. It's only when you put electricity through something, like an LED or a gas, that it can produce light. I'll grant you that arcing electricity certainly is visible as it arcs through the air, but sustaining an arc bright enough and wide enough is helpful for a really long period of time. So let's limit the electric types here to the ones that explicitly mentioned Now, there are some electric type Pokemon who explicitly glow violence. Some kind of bioluminescence is a real thing found in nature. Creating sustained light with electricity isn't really a question of high voltage, but these Pokemon demonstrate that they've got some kind of biomechanical process within themselves to turn electricity into light. What I want to focus on in this video, though, are the Pokemon who can't help but be
I just
using
realized I
Flash
should be doing it in
all
Tamara
the
instead.
time. We're going to be talking about the group of Pokemon who kind of weirdly are almost completely snubbed from learning Flash in the games, even though, as you'll see later,
fuck.
I'm pretty sure they might be the only Pokemon who should learn Flash. We're talking about Fire. But why Fire types, you might ask? Well, have you ever noticed how steel starts to glow when it gets to really high temperatures? Like, literally the phrase red hot? Why is that? Where does that come from? Well, first, we need to talk about light. You might be familiar with the electromagnetic spectrum. If not, here's a quick reminder. Electromagnetic radiation travels in waves. The wavelength of the radiation determines where it falls on the spectrum. You have super long wavelengths, that's infrared light, microwave radiation, or radio waves. Super short wavelengths, that's more high energy stuff, like light, X-rays, or gamma. But there's a little sweet spot where the human eye can pick up the radiation.
Game's
We
up.
call this
Time's
region
over.
spectrum visible light.
Quietly now.
The radiation
How do you let yourself get knocked around by freaking
Invisible evidence.
bunch of low life hooligans kicking your ass? Yellen, come on. That's embarrassing.
It's part of the spectrum and not a different range of wavelengths, but it's what we've got. So in order for the light that Pokemon are producing to be useful to us, it needs to be visible light and not ultraviolet or gamma or anything like that. But how do we get from something hot to it producing visible light? Well, I know you're going to laugh at the name of this next thing I'm going to talk about, especially because the video is about Flash. But can we all just be adults about this, please? There is no reason to be. Beam's displacement law is an extension of something called blackbody radiation. The first important thing to note about this is that heat is the transfer of energy. When something is hot, that means that its molecules are vibrating quickly, raising the object's temperature. Add enough heat to the system, you might get an electron enough energy.
Here comes the catch.
I don't want to get too in the weeds on quantities. It's cool, subscribe now, but basically,
There is
the
no
electrons
escape.
they can only reach quantized levels and then drop back to the original energy level. They release a photon, the particle for light. Depending on the energy difference
Take
that the
them.
electron just experienced
no
when it came
need.
back down, different wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation will be hot enough, and the light might start to hit the visible light spectrum.
Time's over.
Black body radiation
Illusion
refers
shattered. Torn to
theoretical
oblivion.
perfect object for studying this kind of physics. Every single thing in the world, be it a bird or a shirt or an ant, reflects light. For us humans who see in the visible spectrum, to our perspective, that's really all most things do, reflect light. That's what gives your blue shirt its color. The sun or the lamps in your room are producing light that hits your shirt. All of the visible wavelengths are being absorbed
Quietly now.
except for blue. That's being reflected, and that's what hits your eyes and your brain processes the color blue. The shirt doesn't produce any of its own visible light. It's not a source. Even the lamps producing the light in your room reflect some amount of light themselves. But a perfect black body reflects no light at all. With no reflection, any light or color that this object gives off must be coming from within. It's producing all
About
of
to
its
get
own.
dicey.
That is black body radiation.
Incinerate.
Now, of course, I don't think any Pokemon actually fits that model. Basically, nothing in the universe does. It's a theoretical object. But the principles behind black body radiation can be really helpful in expressing how much light an object is giving off as it heats up. Since we aren't taking into account reflections, if the Pokemon is in a dark cave with no other sources, we're really just taking into account how much light the Pokemon is producing on its own. And for those models, we can use black body radiation just fine. This is where Wien's displacement law, or just Wien's law, comes in. Developed by Wilhelm Wien, the man with the most insane name of all time, this law helps us correlate temperature to wavelength in a really simple way. Specifically, Wien's law shows how the peak wavelength of the black body radiation curve differs for different temperatures and energy levels. This is the equation I'm going to use to determine which Pokemon should learn Flash. Essentially, any Pokemon whose Pokédex entry explicitly states its internal or external temperature will be easily plottable on this chart by use of Wien's law to determine what wavelengths of light it will be producing. Remember that part at the beginning when I said I wasn't going to go through the whole Pokédex to find out which Pokemon could learn Flash? Well, I wound up looking through every single fire type's Pokédex entry
This
and a
weather's
lot
got me
more
in the mood for
Pokemon, just to
reciting
see if
some
any of them
laws.
had temperatures
Let's
listed
see.
in their list.
Commercial Law
Luckily, for the
Vila,
first
Chapter
time ever in
27,
one of
Section
these
6,
videos, a
Article
bunch of
3
this work had
stipulates
already
that.
been done by a different internet psychopath besides myself. A user called Mary255 cultivated a list of a ton of Pokemon that have temperatures listed in the Pokédex. I referenced their list, but also found a few more. So here we go. Who's hot enough to be flashing? I do not think I can say that. Everything is somewhat hot. A line that has described me many times. He's lying. That's not true. He's just saying that to look cool, okay? That's not true. I just want to be a part of something. Outside of absolute zero, or 0 Kelvin, a temperature that isn't even theoretically achievable, every single thing in the universe has some amount. Thus, it emits some amount of electromagnetic radiation. It's just that on Earth, since most things are at room temperature or cooler, they only emit in the infrared parts of the spectrum or lower. Around 500 degrees Celsius is when objects begin to emit a faint red color.
Remarkable condition.
Newton's law is able to tell us where the object's radiation peaks, but the object will always emit differing amounts of radiation around the peak in other places as well. Thus, we can basically generalize that any Pokemon with 500 degrees Celsius or greater typically emit some. As we travel along the spectrum, the Pokemon will start to peak in different colors,
There
and
is
then
no
will
escape.
eventually
Inazuma shines eternal.
However, they would still be large amounts of white visible light, hence the
Quietly
term
now.
white
Here
pop.
comes the cat.
Answer and Fennekin are the two hashtag
Busted.
have a temperature listed. Unfortunately, though, for both of them, they're both still totally too cool to produce any amount of visible light. But, cancer's still like 600 so maybe not. Next up, we're going to
Illusion shattered.
Pokemon
To oblivion.
that'll start producing some amount of red visible light, but clearly not enough. Magmar, Flareon, Slugma, Magby, Vortex, Numble, Orcold, Grand, Garganonda, Garganaclan, the Carcoline, Central Scorch, and the Charcadet. Some of the Pokemon I mentioned have names on them though, it's like a whole other thing I'll cover. Okay, let's talk about Incineroar and Magmar. Incineroar and Magmar both have listed temperatures of 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 2,200 Kelvin. This, on its own, is hot enough to be glowing in the visible spectrum, but not with an incredible intensity. We're getting closer, but we're not quite there. Magmortar is probably even less viable, since it's just the fireballs it emits. The problem, though, is that the Pokedex says that Magmortar's body glows white from the fireballs. But 3,600 degrees is not nearly hot enough to be emitting really any white light. It's almost like they just wrote down a random number in the Pokedex and didn't even think about the fact that I have to make this video in the year of our Lord 2024. Come on, like what the heck? Now, if you were to ask me definitively, no holds barred, which Pokemon should be able to learn Flash, neglecting any of the hand-wavy stuff I said earlier about electric types or Pokemon with light-emitting and biscuit in their dex entries, or any of the stuff about fire on their bodies that I'm going to talk about later, I would say there's really only 5. These next 5 Pokemon are the only 5 that definitively, in my opinion, should be producing enough light to be using Flash literally all the time, and should be shoved deep underground like a Balrog, or maybe your search history. There's a few Chinex. First up are Skeledirge and Delphox, who have dex entries that both explicitly state the production of flames at 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. This scorchingly hot temperature is firmly in the red part of the visible spectrum and has enough energy to almost certainly help in a dark pit. Next up to the plate is Pyroar, whose breath is 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know how this thing has fur on its body with internal temperatures that hot, and I especially don't know how it, quote, eats raw meat when the meat is definitely burned to a crisp the instant it enters its mouth. But regardless, Pyroar's breath is comfortably in the blue part of the visible spectrum, and is the same temperature as the surface of the sun. So that's fun. You wouldn't have
Convergence
any
should be
trouble
stronger
seeing the
here.
dark
Let me
phase
try
of
again.
Pyroar. You would have trouble seeing anything ever again. But that is still nothing compared to the two
If a team can
kings of
two-cycle a
destruction,
boss
Magcargo and Temper. Not
from
only
Inazuma and
Pokemon
beyond,
with
that's a good
temperatures of
enough
18,000
DPS for me.
degrees Fahrenheit, but the Pokedex is pretty explicit that it's their bodies.
That's my criteria for good DPS.
Magcargo's dex entry lists
Shine down.
body temperature is roughly 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
These are about
Does
to
not
get
get
dicey.
zero. Analyst dex entry
Now
also
you shall perish.
uninsured body like blood at 18,000 degrees. One problem with that detail is that it looks like magma is long evaporated into gas. But who cares about the little details, right? Regardless though, at that temperature, both of these Pokemon are emitting tons of radiation well into the parts of the spectrum. Lather on that sunscreen. But they're also producing a ton of physical energy. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's good.
So dumb. Why did I even realize that? Let's talk about fire, the opposite of milk. What? Fire, famously the namesake for the fire type, is super easy to use means displacement for. And there are a ton of Pokemon in the Pokedex who have visible fire all over their bodies, but don't have an internal or external temperature listed in the Pokedex. But that's fine. You can literally tell how hot fire is based on its color. After all, that's what we've been talking about in this video, using wavelength, thus color, to figure out an object's temperature. Color, temperature. Color, temperature. Oh my god. Also, regardless of the color of the fire, just the fact that there is a visible flame on the Pokemon body means you're probably getting enough visible light for it to be helpful anyway. I mean, that's basically what torches are for in, like, every action-adventure video game ever. And if Charmander isn't just a really cute torch, I don't know what he is. What? A lizard? Are you f***ing insane? With that being said, there are probably a ton of Pokemon I've already talked about in this video, and some I haven't talked about, that should be good to go. Like the Charmander line, the Ponyta line, the Litwick line, all of those should probably learn Flash. This has really weird ramifications for a Pokemon like Emboar, whose shiny has a different color of fire, and thus is hotter. I don't know what to do about that. I can't make a whole video that's like, which shiny Pokemon should learn Flash? I'll never sleep again. So if you ask me how many Pokemon should be able to learn Flash, my conservative answer is 5. My somewhat more lenient answer is probably about 10, and my very lenient answer, when I include any Pokemon with fire on its body, and a few of the electric types I mentioned, and also any Pokemon with an X entry like Volcanions, which says it can blow away a mountain, my answer is probably about 100 or so. Not bad, but it's 5. I'm working on 2 huge projects at the moment, combining science and Pokemon, and I'll just tease that one of them involves this little guy, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss those. Fine, I'll throw you a little bone. If we hit 100,000 subscribers, I'll make the video you all keep asking for on which Pokemon should learn Strength for now. Thanks for watching, okay, bye!
Whatever would you do without me?
The heck?
Guns are an integral part of video games, with many of the biggest gaming franchises in the world putting the player behind a trigger. Ever since 1992's Wolfenstein 3D, the grandfather of the FPS genre, developers have tried to create weapons that balance realism, satisfaction, and various other considerations with what the technology at the time could achieve.
We can learn all about real-world bullets here at the Royal Armouries Museum, but how do weapon and bullet physics change between games? And how does that boss-slaying or round-winning shot go from here to here? We all know how frequent the sight of a firearm is in our video games, no gun pun for you there, but how do they actually work in real life?
Before I get into how games deliver their virtual lead to target, I spoke to Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries, Jonathan Ferguson, about the way the real bullets work and whether that has any impact on how they're portrayed in gaming.
That with a modern self-contained metallic cartridge, you have usually a brass case, sometimes steel, projectile pressed into the end, hooked into the end, the propellant is inside that case, and you have your percussion cap, used to be a separate item in the 19th century, in the back of that case. That gives you all the ingredients you need to fire a gun. In fact, in many ways, that's the most important piece of technology than the gun itself, or as important. And then you just have to worry about how to get it in and out of the gun, because the whole thing has to go in, the case has to come out, and you have to get a whole new cartridge in the gun. In terms of firing sequence, a hammer or a striker, some pointy bit of metal hits that cap, shock-sensitive compound in there gives you your initial flash. Inside the cartridge case, the propellant starts to burn, and it generates a lot of pressure very quickly. You're looking at 35,000 pounds per square inch for 9mm parabolic example, roughly. That forces the bullet down the barrel. There's nowhere else the pressure can go. It's sealed shut. It's got to be held shut. Otherwise, you lose pressure out the back, and you might blow the gun up. You might blow yourself up. The bullet goes down the barrel, does what you need to do.
Firing a virtual weapon and seeing its working parts move and operate are one of the details that I appreciate the most. And after working on Loadout and across the Firearms Expo React series, I find that I notice those details even more.
Learning more about how real bullets work and how real weapons fire them allows us to look at a game like Escape from Tarkov or Hot Dogs, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades with a deeper perspective. As those are titles that put a lot of attention into accurately recreating all of the motions a firearm goes through between pulling a virtual trigger and hearing a bang through your headset. It can be a double-edged sword though, and maybe you will now share my curse of noticing whether a virtual brass case is ejected towards the edge of your screen without a dimple primer.
But while inarguably cool, for the average gamer, these details matter much less than the simple cause and effect of firing your favourite virtual firearms.
Video games and the guns within them are hugely varied, but the ways in which their shooting mechanics work can have a lot more in common, typically being hit-scan, projectile-based, or different hybrids of the two. The most common type of shooting mechanics is hit-scan. This technique uses technology similar to the one that first allowed 3D games to be developed, raycasting. Raycasting was used to render a three-dimensional scene into a two-dimensional image that could be displayed on the screen. Rays would be traced from the virtual eye of the player through each pixel in the virtual space, calculating things like the colour and light of the object visible through it to ensure it is rendered correctly in the game world. The algorithm had a bunch of complex mathematics and geometry, but the calculations could be done relatively quickly, making it perfect for first-person shooter games, especially when computing power was fairly limited. Take Wolfenstein 3D for example. It's built from a square-based grid with walls being height. To render the world onto the screen, a ray is traced from each column of visible pixels. The algorithm can then scale each object to the correct size, depending on how long the ray takes to intersect or hit each object. Hit-scan weapons work in a very similar way to raycasting. In simplified terms, instead of a wide ray originating from the player's eye, a more narrow one will be cast to represent the weapon being fired. On the most basic level, it will determine where the weapon is being pointed, and use that information to generate a ray, and then use the same raycasting ideas to determine if an object is hit. Usually, if your reticle is intercepting with your target when you fire, then it will be registered by the game engine, which will then enact the desired result, rendering damage on the environment onto an enemy, and initializing the correct sound effects in the logic. Cause and effect of the player clicking their mouse on the trigger and the bullet hitting the target all takes place instantly. And while that's obviously
It's not worth it.
real-world weapons work, game designers use things like clever lighting, graphics, and sound to make the gunfire look and feel as realistic as possible. Depending on the game, more advanced ballistic properties can be applied, such as bullets ricochet by programming rays that bounce off surfaces, or adding bullet penetration by allowing the ray to continue traveling through targets up to a set distance. Other methods used to mimic realism is to add random variables to the angle or placement of that ray that can then expand or change to give a sense of bullet spread or recoil. Hitscan allows a shooter to be a little more accessible to a wider audience, as you're not asking someone who just picked up a game to start learning bullet drop or B types. Games using this method, like the classic Call of Duties, or story-driven shooters like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Half-Life, tend to have shooting mechanics with a more shallow learning curve, but Hitscan can also be a way to allow for
Am I
instant
missing
gratification
something?
when utilising your virtual armor.
But there is another method that's a little more grounded in realism that many shooters use to create a more immersive experience.
Games that want their simulated weapons to be as close as possible to their real-world counterparts are more likely to implement a physical projectile system. Rather than computing shots fired by detecting intercepting rays, a new object is spawned with each round fired by the player. This means bullets can have their own values and behavior. Each shot can have its own collision, mass, and velocity, with the potential of in-game systems influencing each individual bullet. Things like gravity and weight can start to affect the impact of your lethal payload with the system, but it comes with the cost of acquiring extra computing power. Since each object will need to have its own behavior and logic applied to it, the game engine, as well as the game's client and a multiplayer service, must make use of both raw computing power and intelligent programming to ensure the game experience remains consistent. But with game engines, advances in optimization and multiplayer networking, as well as hardware,
no way.
makes a physics-based model much more accessible and more common than it used to be.
Across the 2010s, Battlefield and Call of Duty would often be compared to one another, with Battlefield Bad Company 2 or BF3 offering players a more immersive combat experience or more realistic ballistics. And while they're both favourites of mine, even I can admit they're not the easiest for new players to get into.
Video games, hardware, and player tastes have come a long way, especially in more recent years. And while changes in virtual bullets and ballistics reflect that, these changes have also proven to be necessary for game balance. While most of the franchise has historically used Hitscan for the majority of their weapons, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 used the physics-based ballistic system, which made a lot of sense when you consider the other gameplay changes that were introduced. In the close quarters combat that has classically made up the majority of the more arcade-style Call of Duty multiplayer experience, the travel time of each round is almost imperceptible. But when you consider some of the larger maps or game modes that Modern Warfare 2019 introduced, a physics-based model became necessary. Imagine you're playing Ground War or Warzone, game modes where potential engagement distances are much larger. Now with the weapons or instantaneous hit scan, avoiding snipers taking hot shots from nearby hills or rooftops would be incredibly difficult, and would no doubt be infuriating for players to combat. With these examples, it's clear why Call of Duty moved to a physics-based system, but doing so also raised the skill ceiling, as players would now need to learn new skills to hit those long-range shots, and it provided even more utility to the accessory and customization system that the game's gunsmith provided. Players choose paths that can increase a bullet's velocity and travel time to target. The Battle Royale example isn't unique to Warzone, though. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds was already using physics-based ballistics for similar reasons of balance, variety, customization options, and skill. But generally, most games that use this method will require players to at least account for things like bullet drop and leading targets, depending on the range in which they choose to engage. Bullet drop and travel time makes physics-based systems a necessity for milsims or any other titles that want to create realistic gameplay. Landing a long-range shot is one of the most satisfying things in games, and so bullet physics are a must-have for any title that wants to offer players the opportunity to live out their power fantasies of being a Special Forces sniper. Arma 3 offers an extremely detailed ballistic system, and Sniper Elite's ballistics is one of the franchise's biggest appeals, as their gameplay offers would-be marksmen the opportunity to authentically calculate bullet drop, lead time, and combat windage.
But the core of a physics-based system itself can offer more functionality to developers who want to create moments of even deeper realism, authenticity, or immersion.
Using a physical bullet means that you can add more properties to that object within a 3D space. For example, the sound of a round hitting an object nearby can change depending on the surface it hits, or the distance between the player point of impact. In Ghost Recon Wildlands, bullets have a finite velocity and distance, with a wide array of weaponry all having unique stats, and if you are using a suppressed weapon with subsonic ammunition, then the time to impact your target is noticeably slower. As the bullets in Escape from Tarkov are physical entities that actually move through a player's weapon, it means there is also similar potential for authentic interaction and detailed armor hitbox system when it comes to armor penetration, ricochets, or a shot being able to sneak under your helmet into your head or eyes. One of the other details in Escape from Tarkov that still makes me in the seat is the sound of a bullet's supersonic crack as the shot whizzes by your ear after a lucky miss. This can change depending on how far that physical bullet was from the player, if the virtual ammunition was supersonic or subsonic, and at longer distances or with suppressed weapons, that crack or slight whiz may be the only warning you get when someone is trying to take your hard-earned loot. With both hit-stand and physical ballistic systems in mind though, where your virtual bullets actually come from will also be hugely impactful to gameplay. Bullets don't always originate from your gun. For simplicity, games will often have them coming out of the player's eye or the center of the screen, tracing an invisible line between the player's view and the position of the crosshair to register a hit, instead of the muzzle of the weapon model. However, if the player's view is tied to the player model's head, this can create an issue called head glitching, something that has been a source of frustration for FPS players for years. This is because with this method you're basically shooting out of your face, creating a huge advantage as you can fire from the safety of cover, and enemy players have a much smaller target to hit. One of the most extreme examples of this is in Team Fortress 2 with the Heavy's minigun. Despite them holding their weapon at waist height, the bullets are coming out of the player's eyes, creating moments where you can flush up against cover with your large form protected, yet still able to fire away effectively. This can be somewhat rectified by games with the camera and the bullet's point of origin lower to the chest or shoulder height, but this may also create a feeling of disconnect between the player's view and the world around them. But you obviously don't see the bullets coming out of your forehead or your crosshair. They look like they're coming out of your weapon, even when they aren't. The truth is, both with hit-scan and physical ballistic systems, it's fairly common that bullets or projectiles you see on the screen are purely cosmetic. Developers often add fake tracer rounds or objects that appear to be originating from the muzzle of the weapon model and moving through the game world. And the real imported version that's being shot through the center of the player's view is invisible. This is all the more noticeable in games that use a physical system, as when close to a wall or object, it can appear that the cosmetic projectile is passing through those close obstacles. There are many games where a lot of work is put into disguising core weapon mechanics with flashy animations and effects, and by no means do I think that's a bad thing, as these are all efforts to ensure the weapons feel responsive and satisfying while to the player. But I do think that it's interesting that in a lot of titles, most of what you can see on the screen doesn't actually matter to the mechanics of the game. That in actuality, you're little more than an invisible floating camera with a hitbox. However, some games actually do use the muzzle of their virtual weaponry as the origin point for their bullets. While more authentic, it does mean that players need to be careful with their weapon placement, as regardless of your position, your shots will impact any object in front of your gun's barrel. This can largely eliminate the issue of glitching, as players will need to expose enough of their player model that their virtual gun can stick out. But it can take a little getting used to, as it creates the issue of height over bore. Basically, the distance between your scope and barrel while your view is clear, the barrel a few inches lower is being blocked by a close object. Some games will also render a secondary crosshair on your HUD, one representing what you are aiming at and the other drawn on any close object that could block your shot. The inverse of this can be seen most obviously in Rainbow Six Siege, as the hit-scan shots originate from the scope of the weapon while aiming. As due to the confined nature of the maps, this avoids any potential frustration of shots unexpectedly hitting the wall you're peeking out from. The game designers don't have to stick with one technique or the other. In fact, these methods have frequently been merged together within the same game for various reasons in different ways for decades. Take Fortnite for example. Prior to Chapter 5, most of the weapons were hit-scan, which lends itself to a faster-paced, close combat gameplay experience. That was except for weapons like sniper rifles, which used a projectile system, so the players who take the time to compensate for a moving target and bullet drop are rewarded with high damage attacks from a potentially safe range. Season 5 changed the game's ballistics, so now most of the weapons are projectile-based to better work around the game's new attachment system. It's also common to see games that have weapons like rocket launchers and bows use a physics system for those, while the rest of the arsenal is hit scan. For example, in earlier Call of Duty titles, all of the firearms would be hit scan, but something like a grenade launcher or RPG that had a much slower and much more visible payload were projectiles. Even the original Doom mixed shot types when it came to specific weaponry, with the pistol, shotgun, and chain gun being hit scan, and the plasma gun and rocket launcher spawning a simple projectile. Overwatch is another great example of this combined system, as Soldier 76's assault rifle is hit scan, but the Helix rocket you can also fire from it is physical. Heroes that use hit scan are also popular picks to counter others with high mobility, as they don't have to worry about leading their shots, just staying on target. Team Fortress 2 has weapons like the Scout Scattergun or the Sniper's Rifle that spawns hit scan bullets from the player's eye, while also having bows and arrows that require a player to consider drop and lead time, as well as Soldier's Rocket Launcher that actually spawns a physical projectile from the weapon itself.
Our previous examples were games utilizing multiple systems across their arsenals, but also hybrid systems with
Whoa,
the gun
nice
itself.
For example, in Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, firearms are hit scan and hit immediately within 25 to 50 meters, where calculating ballistics simply wouldn't matter. Instead, bullets will become physics-based should the shot need to travel further. This is the method that reduces computing demands on a more
How time flies. My burns are almost healed now, so I should be ready to take back the kitchen tomorrow. You've really gone above and beyond these past few days.
Why does Paimon feel like... We made it all the way to the evening. It ended up being a pretty smooth day after all. Maybe it's because we've gotten so experienced at... We've come a long way since our first day on the job, haven't we? Back then, we were struggling to remember who ordered what. Yeah, but who would come by this late in the evening? Actually, now that Paimon thinks of it, Lenny and his siblings came around about this time the first day, didn't they?
Traveler? Paimon? Fancy seeing you two here.
Amber? And Eula and Mika, too! Are you here for dinner? Why so late in the day?
We just finished an escort mission for a merchant caravan. The original plan was to make do with some rations, but Captain Eula brought up the fact that none of us have eaten Liyue cuisine for quite some time.
Ooh, so this is Eula's treat, huh?
We've been eating the same rations for the entire trip, so I simply thought it was high time we had ourselves a proper meal. Do you have a problem with that? Good question. What should we get? Wait a sec. Why are you taking our order?
The Traveler's been filling in for the chef here. You come at just the right time. You'll be the last
Wow, really? Good thing Eula suggested we come here. I wouldn't want to miss this. So, what shall we get? I'm not as familiar with Liyue cuisine as I used to be. Mika, you...
Anything goes. I'm just looking forward to trying the honorary knight's cooking.
Something small, I suppose. We have to hit
Amber
the road
and
again
Eula's
after we
screen
eat.
time is good, I
Yama,
guess.
Anything?
Wasn't it your idea to come here, though? Eesh, this is like getting blood from a stone. All right, guess it's up to you, Amber. You name it, we'll cook it.
Huh? Then I guess... I don't really...
Ah!
I'm sorry. I really can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Oh, one thing. I know I said I don't mind what we have, but...
I've still got some sparkling...
Anything goes, huh? Oh dear. This is a chef's worst. Still, now that you've worked in the kitchen for so many days...
It's literally called Anything Goes. How boring.
This is delicious. Perfectly seasoned, and even the rice is
Nothing like a piping hot meal served straight from the stove.
You've put the finest Favonian field rations to shame, and that's no mean feat.
It's Cubs! Paimon's guessing we can't just call it Anything Goes, right? Oh, hell, Paimon doesn't know how to explain this dish at all. It's got no name, it's just
basic ingredients, simply cooked? Really? I could have sworn that you...
Not the finest dish in the world, but the one they need right now. Okay, you've lost Paimon. What do you mean?
So you mean... we only think this is delicious because we're so hungry?
Perhaps the fact that the aroma of freshly cooked hot food is a...
Oh, kinda like the feeling of waking up to the smell of freshly baked bread and...
Yeah, it's almost like we're back at Good Hunt...
But Good Hunter's in Mondstadt.
Oh, I'm not talking about the taste. I just meant the feeling of...
Comfort. Coming home. Well, Yanxiao did say we want to make our guest...
So in other words, the secret...
Despite how terribly cliched that sounds, I'll admit that it holds true for this meal. Well played. Mark my words, I'll remember this recipe.
Okay, but you can't really have a recipe without a name, though, right? Have we come up with a name for this dish yet? How about Right at Home?
The rations we brought were adapted from my signature moon pies. To come up with something even tastier. I gotta hand it to you. You did a great job. Still, please do drop by and try a few Stormcrest pies next time you're in town. I insist.
Sorry. I zoned out just now. Yeah, that food you cooked for us just now, it reminded me of the meals my grandfather used to make for me. I thought I'd forgotten how they taste. He used to make Liyue dishes all the time. I'd do my outrider training I'd sit there with the smell of delicious food wafting in from the kitchen. Sometimes we'd have Eula around for dinner. And even though she'd always find something to complain about, I could tell she really enjoyed the food. Your words, not mine. Don't ask her about it. She'll only give you another earful.
Check this out, Eula.
Water jet!
There you are. Thank you for all of your hard work over the past few days. Straight down to brass tacks, are we? Here, take it. I've thrown in...
Yay! It's like all the tiredness and...
I'm just lucky you only worked on this job for a few days. At the rate you are progressing, a few more weeks and I think I might be made redundant. Anytime. Bring some friends with you next time.
Great! Although, just to be on the safe side, cook carefully in the meantime.
Only 2 seconds. Yeah, I guess two piece would be the best. Although 50% skill damage bonus is still pretty good. That's actually even good for Dihya. I guess Nymph's Dream would be good too. I want to try increasing her personal damage. I like to consider myself a traveler main. Although I like Noelle way more. Alright, that's useless. Hopefully I had a sand or something. It's not worth it.
I see everything! The Temple of Wisdom!
Get with me! Lightning Spirit Box! This is long overdue.
Come on! Focus!
Fuck.
Everyone hold hands!
This way!
This may turn a little. Make yourself at home!
The bond is strong!
Go!
I guess Cookie heals more than Lumi can deal damage to herself.
Ad Astra. Thank you for complete. Ad Astra.
There'll be an extra fee for that.
Feels like it's been forever since I last fished, but could it be that my fish still simply just hasn't respawned yet?
Steady now! It's the final strip! What is it? What is it? Is it another Paimon?
No, there's one.
So close, so close! Wow, Paimon's stomach is rumbling already!
Stay strong.
Victory is almost ours! What is it? What is it? Is it another Paimon?
Patience. Stay strong.
You've got it! You got it! Wow, Paimon's stomach is rumbling already!
And I thought I didn't have hydro damage for some reason. That would have been very embarrassing. That's a thing?
I'll keep this close.
Victory is almost ours! Whoa! Nice catch! You've got it! You got it! What is it? What is it? Is it another Paimon?
Yeah, I think I'm out of fish and they still just haven't respawned yet. I swear it's been like 2 weeks since I last went fishing. How time flies, huh? Although in this case, it's the opposite. Time has clearly not flown enough, but it feels like it has. This is quite a lot, actually.
What do you mean astrologists shouldn't be allowed to play? Really? I would never use hydromancy to cheat.
This deck's been feeling very weak as of late. Oh, I just realized. Yeah, I haven't.
Come on, let's go. There's a fortune to be made.
Shadows of fate!
Let's light it up!
I will protect you.
Out of the way!
I must leave no stone unturned. Shadows of fate! Time to clean up. Fate is upon you. The stars are fading. By royal decree! Come on, let's go. There's a fortune to be made.
Wait, why? You fucking idiot.
Not again.
Leave it all to me.
Teamwork is dreamwork!
As you wish.
Out of the way!
I am a disgrace to the knights.
Let's light it up!
Don't waste my time.
I summon thee!
Give up.
Shit.
Shadow Raven, let night fall!
Your life is mine.
One shall descend once again.